Full frame, APS-C. Full frame, APS-C. Which one's right for you? Should you get APS-C, save some money, take advantage of the crop factor? Or should you commit to a full frame camera and shoot like real professional photographers?
Just kidding.
Lots of professionals use APS-C crop. Some even use micro four thirds, but I don't know about that, so I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just going to talk to you about full frame versus APS-C. So let's find out together. Hold on a sec, I'll be right back.
Here I am, Vietnam. Rain is always coming down.
Camera Talk with Dr. Scott. All right, this week what we're going to be looking at is the differences between a full frame sensor and an APS-C sensor, and what the benefits are of either one and why you may want to use one or the other in certain circumstances. So first off, let's just get a quickie definition of what what those terms mean.
Well, you want to learn something?
Yes, I do.
So on this side here, I have Sony's original A7, which is their first full frame sensor that they got into the market with, and it is, when it's called a full frame, the reason they call it that is they're comparing it to the original back in the film days. 35 millimeter film size was 36 millimeters by 24 millimeters, so yay big. And the full frame sensor in here is the equivalent size of that, so it's basically like a replacement of, or a tit for tat, so to speak. So that is what a full frame sensor is. Now this one is on my Canon M50 here. Now, of course, the black frame is a cage that I put on there just to make it a little bigger for my hand to hold on to, a little more comfortable. But anyway, if you take a look at the sensor here, you can see that it's a smaller size. It's 22 millimeters by 15 millimeters height. So that's physically what the differences are between the two. Now, next thing we're going to look at, so besides the size of the sensor itself, is going to be the megapixels. Now you always hear that, talking about cameras and their sensors being certain megapixels. Now, as I just told you, this is a full frame, this is an APS-C. So you saw the size of the sensor here was bigger than this one. It's actually two and a half times bigger than this one. But the megapixels are going to be roughly the same. On the Sony here, it's the Sony A7 is a 24.2 megapixel sensor. On the Canon, it's a 24.1 megapixel sensor. So megapixels, you have a bigger sensor, smaller sensor, but the same megapixel. So what is that? What's the difference with that then? Why would you even care one way or the other? Well, to tell you the truth about it, the reason being that you may decide that the full frame sensor might be for you is due to image quality. Now, when I talk about megapixels between the two, resolution-wise,
No pride for you who ruined everything my revolution was doing to stop the bourgeoisie.
they're the same. They're both, resolving pictures that are roughly 24 megapixels for the resolution. Now, when it comes to image quality, that is a whole different ballgame, because the image quality is going to be better on your full frame due to the fact that as you saw, the size of the sensor here means that there's more real estate to populate those 24 megapixels, And therefore, with a larger surface area to put those megapixel cells, the larger the actual cell can be.
Oh, size as in height or width or...
And the larger the cell is, the more light that you can capture. And so therefore, when it comes to capturing that light, it means that your like your ISO sensitivities and whatnot are going to be able to produce a better image quality overall. So with that, with that being said, as I just, said, the smaller sensor here also has 24.1 megapixels on it. But because the surface area of this sensor is smaller, the pixel cells themselves are smaller.
That's how you use it.
Limiting the amount of light that they could capture. So if you compare these two with their ISO settings, let's say at 3200 or something, the 3200 ISO setting here is not really going to appear to make much difference. Whereas in the 3200 here, you're going to see more electronic noise in the background, kind of a grainier image. So that's really the difference when it comes to sensor size. Now, speaking of, because this is a 24 megapixel, 24.2 megapixel sensor, that same sensor size is also used in other models of the same sensor size. So my Sony A7R II, which is filming this video, it has a 42.4 megapixel sensor. It's got the exact same sensor size as this one, but basically they are using the surface area to populate more pixel cells, which are obviously going to have to be a little smaller to be able to fit onto the screen. So talking about a revolution. You're not going to have too much difference in ISO performance, but technically this one should be better at ISO performance due to the fact that pixel cell sizes are actually larger than the A7R II, which is filming this video. So that is that's sensor size.
So many different sizes.
Now what I want to talk about is the effects of lenses. And as you know, if you've been watching this channel, my videos I'll focus on vintage lenses. Now vintage lenses, of course, mean back in the film day, and back in that film day, all the cameras were 35 millimeter, right? Well, not all, of course. They had a medium format and large format and so forth. But I'm talking just your standard camera was 35 millimeter. So this example I'm going to be using here is my Super Takamar Asahi Super Takamar 50 millimeter 1.4. Now this was designed for a 35 millimeter camera, and as I've already said, the full frame is mimicking that 35 millimeter old film camera. So therefore, this 35 millimeter lens is going to behave. Yeah. As it should on this sensor, due to the fact that they're just mimicking each other. Now onto an APS-C camera, this same 50 millimeter lens is not going to behave as a 35 millimeter camera, due to the fact that the full frame has 2.5 times more surface area to be able to capture the equivalent image and light and everything coming through this lens, versus this one, which is going to have, because it's a Canon, it's going to have a 1.6 crop factor in there, versus the APS-C. If you turn on the APS-C function here, it's 1.5. But Canon's sensors are a little bit sized differently than the standard in the rest of the market. So it's a 1.6. So I'm going to show you some equivalent or equivalency differences by taking a picture of the camera that's filming us right now. Okay, so here I have an M42 because the Takamar is an M42 mount to NEX, and let me find my little dot here. All right, so what I'm going to do is take a picture of the camera that's filming us right now, and I'm going to open it up to 1.4 aperture. I should probably turn it on first, and let me focus in. All right, so let me get a shot of us here. Let me zoom in on the end of the lens so I can get a nice clear shot of that. All right. So that is the 50 millimeter on a full frame camera, a full frame sensor. So therefore, it should resolve exactly as the 50 millimeter should on a full frame camera. Now on my, actually I have to change adapters. So here I have a M42 to EOS M because it's the EOS M mount here, and because it's a screw, M42 is a screw mount, it just kind of slides right on in there. Let me do the same to this lens, to this camera, and give you an example of what I see through this lens, through this camera. All right, so this is the Sony A7R II filming this video, and this is a picture of it through my Canon M50 with a 50 millimeter 1.4 Super Takamar. And obviously with the fact that it's a 50 millimeter, it's obviously not behaving as a the 50 millimeter would with the field of view, due to the fact that there's a 1.6 crop factor on there. So my 50 millimeter is in fact capturing the field of view of the equivalent being on this camera would be an 80 millimeter lens. So it's behaving as that. And that's where there's a lot of confusion in the market, especially with beginners not understanding that APS-C cameras have that crop factor, and therefore they think if they have a 50 millimeter lens that they're getting a 50 millimeter field of view, to which they're not. As I said, with the crop factor, it's at 1.6, it's 80 millimeter. If this was, you know, a Sony APS-C or you know, another Canon, or not Canon, a you know, another manufacturer's APS-C, it would be like Fuji or whatnot, it would be 1.5. Therefore, this 50 millimeter would actually have an equivalent field of view as a 75 millimeter lens would. So that's the difference between the two. Now with something else to, I guess if you want to call it, complicate things, what I want to show you now is something with APS-C cameras that's actually, you know, a benefit to users as well, is what they call a speed booster. Now this speed booster here is it's an adapter, but the difference is there's a piece of glass in here. So there's you know, optical element involved in the speed booster. And what it does is it magnifies by 0.71 times. Therefore, it changes first 1.6 crop factor, so that turns it into an 80 millimeter, right? But if you put the speed booster on, you multiply that by 0.71 times, and it brings it down to 56.8 millimeters. So it's closer to the original 50 millimeter that you were seeking in the first place. I have a 50 millimeter lens here. Let me take that off. And this is a Canon Nifty 50. Where's my dot? All right. So what I'm going to do now is put this 50 millimeter Canon Nifty 50 on my Canon M50, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. We already just did a picture with the 50 millimeter Takumar, so now I'm going to do one with the 50 millimeter Nifty 50 just to show you. Get a picture of this. 1, 2, 3. And you'll be able to see the field of view difference between the two. I could tell right away by just looking through the lens itself. You know, not to drag this video on too long, so I'm gonna stop here and talk about, you know, obviously the benefits of the APS-C camera. For one, the body. Let me get rid of this lens here. The body of the camera itself is smaller. I mean, it's physically, you know, if you could hold it up and see this way, it's physically smaller than the Sony. Not by much, because Sony has a pretty small footprint, but if you compare it to other APS-C Canons, the bodies are much bigger. So this M50 is actually pretty tiny compared to them, which is why I got this cage on there, just so I get a better grip. Plus there's many holes on here, so I can mount it a bunch of different ways onto a tripod. But still, the beauty of APS-C cameras is the size is the first thing. After that, the depth of field is the next benefit. So again, you have 50 millimeter lenses, and you know, you get on an APS-C the equivalent of either 75 millimeter on a 1.5 crop or a 80 millimeter on a 1.6 crop. And you know, the benefit of that is the depth of field. So your depth of field, of course, means you're zooming. It appears as if you're zooming in, but you notice that too if you're ever in you know, any of the photo apps in your computer, and you want to crop a photograph, right? So you choose an area that you want to keep in your photograph, and you want to cut out the rest of it. But when you crop in, when you hit enter, you'll see what you've got left over blows up into a bigger picture, right? It's the exact same thing is happening here when you're taking a photo, is it automatically crops in. So it appears as if you're zooming in without really zooming in. So as I said, your 50 millimeter field of view becomes an 80 millimeter field of view. So it's acting as if it's zooming in without physically doing so. So that's the first benefit. Second is the out of focus background. You know, if you're a portrait shooter like me, I prefer to shoot people as opposed to landscapes, even though there's nothing wrong with landscapes. I think there's some beautiful ones out there, and I do shoot a few of those. But majority of my photos are with people, and with people, of course, in portraiture, you'd like to have, you know, a nice clear image with the person you're taking a photo of. But then you want the background not to be distracting, so you like the out of focus background to you know, kind of melt away a little bit. And of course, depending on which camera or which lens you're using, results in different quality of that background blur, which is referred to as bokeh. You know, the quality of the bokeh is what photographers speak of when they mention bokeh. Now your background can be distracting. It could be the bokeh maybe very choppy and blocky and whatnot. So therefore that particular lens is not going to be good for portraiture versus one like this Super Takamar. The background does blend away very nicely, as they call buttery smooth. And so that's, you know, as I say, that's the benefit of the APS-C, as well as having the speed boosters as well. Gives you the options of either keeping the zoom effect of the APS-C as it is, or using a speed booster and capturing back that natural, as close to it as you can get anyway, with your original focal length of your lens. So a 50 becomes a 56.8. So it's not exactly a 50, but it's closer than 80 millimeter, right? And of course, with the full frame, you know, your benefit is the fact that you're using 50 millimeter designed lenses, and they behave the way they should on your full frame, because that's the way they are. The other thing I forgot to mention with APS-C is they nowadays lens manufacturers design lenses specifically for the smaller sensor size. So therefore, you're capturing the full scene that you're hoping to get with that lens. Versus if you use that APS-C designed lens on a full frame, you're going to end up with a vignette in the corners where you'll see darkened corners, because it's designed to capture the light on a smaller sensor like that. So, long story short, don't use APS-C lenses on your full frame. I have another video earlier talking about the exposure triangle and whatnot that talks about that in a little more depth. So you can always check out that video. And there's many others, of course, on YouTube that you could check out. But that's all I have for you this week. I hope you got a little bit of information out of there that you may not have known before, or maybe confirming something you've heard, and I can help you out in that regard. So thanks for dropping by. This has been Camera Talk with Dr. Scott. Don't forget to subscribe, and like this video, please. It helps with getting this out there to other viewers for more exposure, so to speak. So anyway, talk to you next week. Come on back for some more. Remember, you belong here, and you have yourself a great week and a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next video.
Here I am.